My name is Dorothy Jenkins, 58 years old, and until recently, I thought I knew my daughter Amanda better than anyone else in the world. After my husband Michael died, I raised her alone, building my career as a financial advisor while creating a stable home. When Amanda got engaged to Blake, I was thrilled to help plan their beach wedding. But everything changed at that pre-wedding dinner. The moment Blake smirked and pushed that figure across the table, $60,000. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever dealt with someone who tried to put a price tag on family love. After Michael died from pancreatic cancer, when Amanda was just 10 years old, it was just the two of us against the world. Those first few years were incredibly difficult. I would often find myself crying in the shower, so Amanda wouldn't hear me, then pulling myself together to make her breakfast with a smile. We had Michael's modest life insurance policy, but I knew I needed to be smart about our future. I threw myself into my career as a financial advisor. Starting at a small local firm in our suburban town outside Boston, I worked my way up through long hours and dedicated client service. It wasn't glamorous, but it allowed us to maintain our modest three-bedroom home in a good school district and provide Amanda with everything she truly needed, if not everything she wanted. Amanda and I developed a special bond through those difficult years. On weekend mornings, we'd make pancakes shaped like animals and talk about everything from school drama to her dreams for the future. She'd sit at the kitchen counter doing homework while I prepared dinner, sharing the small details of her day that knit our lives together. What made me most proud was Amanda's character. Despite losing her father at such a young age, she grew into this thoughtful, empathetic person. In middle school, she started a program collecting toiletries for the local women's shelter. In high school, she volunteered at the hospital where Michael had spent his final days. Education was always important in our family. Michael had been a high school science teacher passionate about learning, and I honored his memory by prioritizing Amanda's education. I started a college fund when she was 11, contributing what I could, even when money was tight. Amanda did her part too, maintaining a 3.8 GPA and earning a partial academic scholarship to State University. She chose nursing as her profession, a perfect fit for her compassionate nature. I still remember the day she got her acceptance letter to the nursing program. We danced around the kitchen, laughing and crying. That night, I told her how proud her father would have been, and we looked through old photo albums, remembering him together. When Amanda graduated and landed her first job at Memorial Hospital, I felt like we'd accomplished something incredible together. She found an apartment with a nursing school friend just 20 minutes from my house. Even with her busy schedule, we maintained our Sunday brunch tradition, either at my place or at the little cafe halfway between our homes. Throughout these years, I was careful with my finances. I built a modest retirement fund enough to cover my needs, assuming I worked until 65. I also maintained a separate emergency fund for potential medical expenses. Growing older alone means planning carefully, and as a financial advisor, I understood the importance of self-sufficiency. Amanda was always mindful of my situation. For birthdays and Christmas, she gave thoughtful gifts rather than expensive ones. When she received her first substantial bonus at work, she offered to help with a new roof for my house, knowing it had been a concern. I declined but was touched by her generosity. My extended family wasn't always understanding about our circumstances. My sister-in-law Patty, with her perfect suburban life, and husband, who worked in finance, often made subtle comments about my older model car or Amanda's decision to attend state rather than a private university. Amanda always defended me fiercely, once telling Patty at a family gathering, "My mom worked twice as hard as anyone here, and she never needed to show it off with fancy things." That's why what happened later was so shocking. The Amanda I raised understood that value wasn't measured in dollars. She appreciated experiences over possessions and grew up knowing that financial responsibility was about security, not status. Our family traditions were simple but meaningful. Every summer, we took a week's vacation to a small beach cottage in Maine that a client rented to me at a discount. We'd collect seashells, read paperbacks on the sand, and eat lobster rolls from the local shack. Those were some of our happiest times, just the two of us with no distractions. Even as Amanda built her own adult life, she remained thoughtful about including me. She'd invite me to join her and her friends for movie nights, introduce me to her colleagues at hospital events, and call just to check in several times a week. We talked about everything from workplace challenges to dating disasters. Before Blake, I felt secure in our relationship. I believed I'd raised a daughter who would always value our connection regardless of who else entered her life. I was prepared for her to fall in love, to build her own family, but I never expected to become an outsider. I never expected to be seen as nothing more than a potential contributor to an extravagant wedding. Looking back, I wonder how I missed the signs of what was coming. Perhaps I was blinded by my desire to see Amanda happy. Perhaps I didn't want to acknowledge that the daughter I thought I knew so well could change so fundamentally in just 18 months. But change she did after Blake entered the picture. I first met Blake at Ariella's, an upscale Italian restaurant downtown that was well beyond my usual budget. Amanda had been dating him for about 6 weeks and was eager for us to meet. She'd been uncharacteristically secretive about this relationship, which should have been my first clue that something was different. From the moment we sat down, Blake dominated the conversation. He ordered an expensive bottle of wine without consulting the menu or asking our preferences. He spoke at length about his career as a real estate developer, the luxury properties his firm was building along the coast, and the connections his family had in the industry. "My father started the company 30 years ago," he explained, swirling his wine with practiced elegance. "We've transformed the shoreline with properties that start at $2 million. I'm heading up our new resort development project." Amanda sat beside him, nodding and smiling. I noticed she'd styled her hair differently, wore more makeup than usual, and had on a dress I'd never seen before that looked far more expensive than what she typically bought on a nurse's salary. When I mentioned my own career as a financial advisor, Blake's interest noticeably cooled. "Oh, which firm?" he asked, and when I told him the name of my mid-size regional company, he gave a slight nod. "Never heard of them. We use Goldman for our personal accounts and have several in-house advisors for the business." It was a small moment, but I felt the dismissal keenly. Throughout dinner, he made similar subtle comments about my car. "You're still driving a Camry? They last forever, I guess. My neighborhood. That area used to be so rough, but I hear it's improving. And even my choice of entree. The chicken is the safe choice, but the imported truffles in the risotto are extraordinary." Amanda, who had always defended me before, said nothing. Worse, I noticed her wincing slightly at my mention of our upcoming Maine beach vacation. "We're actually thinking of going to the Maldives in the fall," she interjected quickly. "Blake's family has a connection with a resort there." Over the next few months, I watched my daughter transform. Her speech patterns changed, adopting Blake's vocabulary of exclusivity, premier, luxury, elite, exclusive. She began canceling our standing Sunday brunches for yacht club outings with Blake's family or open houses at properties his firm was developing. When she did visit, she'd bring expensive gifts, a designer handbag I'd never use, crystal wine glasses too fancy for my casual entertaining cashmere sweaters in colors I never wore. These presents felt less like thoughtful gestures and more like attempts to upgrade me to a standard Blake found acceptable. "Blake says that bag is classic mom. You need some quality pieces," she told me, dismissing the practical leather purse I'd carried for years. I tried to maintain our connection, inviting them both for dinner at my home. Blake arrived with a bottle of wine that cost more than my entire meal budget and made a show of explaining its rare vintage. He questioned my investment strategies when I mentioned my retirement planning, suggesting aggressive options that would have been entirely inappropriate for someone of my age and circumstances. "You're leaving money on the table with these conservative positions," he said confidently. "My father's friend made 40% returns last year on a commercial development deal." I gently explained the differences between speculative investments and retirement security, drawing on my professional expertise, but he waved away my concerns. "That's thinking small," he said. "No one gets wealthy playing it safe." Most concerning was how Amanda's visits alone became increasingly rare. Blake seemed to consume all her time attention, and now even her personality. When I expressed concern about the changes in her life, she became defensive. "Blake just wants the best for us, Mom. He's helping me see the bigger picture." 8 months into their relationship, they announced their engagement at a party held at Blake's family estate. It was the first time I'd met his parents, though Amanda had been spending holidays and frequent weekends with them instead of me. The Hamiltons' home was imposing, a 6-bedroom colonial on 3 manicured acres, with a pool house larger than my entire first floor. Blake's mother, Vivian, a slender woman with expensively highlighted hair and subtle cosmetic enhancements, air-kissed my cheeks and complimented my unique necklace, a silver pendant Michael had given me on our 10th anniversary. "How charming to have such sentimental pieces," she said, fingering her own diamond necklace. Blake's father, Richard, tall and imposing in custom-tailored clothing, gave my hand a firm shake and immediately launched into questions about my investment firm's assets under management, losing interest when the numbers didn't impress him. Throughout the evening, I felt like an exhibit, the quaint middle-class mother being assessed and found wanting. Amanda, usually so attuned to my feelings, seemed oblivious, flitting between guests in her new designer dress, laughing too loudly at Blake's father's jokes. At dinner, Blake corrected Amanda's table manners, touching her wrist when she reached for the wrong fork. The Amanda I knew would have been mortified by such public correction, but this new Amanda just smiled apologetically and adjusted her behavior. It was as though she was being molded before my eyes, shaped into someone who would fit perfectly into the Hamilton family image. After the engagement, the distance between us grew even wider. Our phone conversations became shorter, more superficial. Amanda spoke about wedding details with a strange detachment, as though reciting from a script. When I tried to engage her about her feelings or concerns, she deflected. "Everything's under control, Mom. Blake and his family have connections with the best vendors." I began to realize that the daughter I'd raised with values of compassion, authenticity, and financial responsibility was disappearing behind a facade of luxury and status, and I had no idea how to reach her anymore. 3 months after the engagement, Amanda called to say they'd selected a venue for the wedding, a private beach club in Malibu where Blake's cousin had recently married. This caught me by surprise. Amanda had always talked about getting married at Lakeview Gardens, a beautiful local botanical garden, where we had taken weekend walks after Michael died. "But honey, you always said you wanted a garden wedding," I reminded her gently. "Remember how you loved the gazebo at Lakeview?" "That was before Mom," she said dismissively. "A beach wedding is much more elevated. The photos will be incredible with the sunset over the ocean." I swallowed my disappointment and asked about budget expectations, explaining that while I'd been saving for her wedding, my resources were limited. "Don't worry about that right now," she said vaguely. "Blake says we'll figure out the financial stuff later." That conversation set the tone for the wedding planning process. I was included just enough to be aware of decisions, but not enough to influence them. The guest list was dominated by Blake's extensive family connections and business associates. When I submitted my modest list of 30 close friends and our remaining family members, it was cut down to 15, with the explanation that space was limited, despite the venue supposedly accommodating 300 guests. Blake's mother took Amanda to exclusive bridal salons I would never have been able to afford. When I asked to join them for dress shopping, Amanda told me they'd already selected a custom gown from a designer whose name I didn't recognize. "It's being made to exact specifications," she explained. "Vivian has connections in the fashion industry." I was invited to a venue tour where I got my first glimpse of the astronomical costs involved. The beach club membership alone required a six-figure initiation fee, which Blake's father had apparently paid years ago. The rental fee for the wedding weekend was casually mentioned as $50,000. "Worth every penny for the exclusivity," Vivian commented, noticing my shocked expression. "We wouldn't want just anyone wandering into the celebration." Throughout the tour, Vivian made references to the cost of each element: the imported Italian marble dance floor being constructed over the sand, the rare orchids being flown in from Thailand, the Michelin-starred chef creating a custom menu. With each revelation, she would add comments like, "Of course we understand if this is beyond what you're accustomed to," or "Amanda deserves the very best, doesn't she?" At a meeting with the wedding planner, a severe woman in her 40s named Margot, who treated Blake's mother with deference and barely acknowledged my presence, I attempted to contribute a meaningful element to the celebration. "I thought perhaps we could incorporate some photos of Amanda with her father," I suggested. "Maybe a small memorial table. Michael would have loved to be here." Margot exchanged glances with Vivian before responding. "We're aiming for a celebratory atmosphere rather than anything melancholy. Perhaps you could incorporate those elements at the rehearsal dinner instead." The rehearsal dinner, I later learned, was being hosted at an exclusive restaurant by Blake's parents, with a guest list that included only the wedding party and out-of-town guests, most of whom were Blake's relatives. As the months passed, Amanda transformed from my level-headed daughter into someone I barely recognized. She became fixated on details that seemed absurd: the exact shade of white for the napkins, the precise height of centerpieces, the specific vintage of champagne for the toast. The florist used cream ribbons instead of ecru on the sample arrangements. She complained during one of our increasingly rare phone calls. "Can you believe their incompetence? Blake's mother had to make 3 calls to fix it." I often found out about wedding details through social media rather than directly from Amanda. She posted photos of cake tastings I hadn't been invited to, bridal shower gifts from Blake's family friends, weekend trips to the venue for planning sessions. Each image showed her smiling, surrounded by the Hamiltons and their circle, with no mention of me or our family traditions. When I called to ask about these events, she was distracted and vague. "Oh, those decisions had to be made quickly, Mom. I didn't want to bother you with last-minute trips." Vivian's passive-aggressive comments became more frequent and pointed. During a tasting where I was finally included, she remarked on my choice of the simpler menu option. "I suppose some palates aren't developed enough to appreciate truffle and foie gras. It's sweet that you prefer the chicken." When I mentioned that my brother would be driving in from Arizona for the wedding and asked about nearby affordable hotels, she raised her eyebrows. "Everything in that area is quite exclusive," she said. "Perhaps he would be more comfortable in one of the chain hotels in the valley. It's only an hour's drive in traffic." The bachelor and bachelorette parties were planned for the same weekend in Cabo San Lucas. Amanda didn't even pretend I might be included, merely informing me she would be away and unreachable. The photos that appeared afterward showed her laughing on a yacht, drinking champagne with Blake's sisters and friends I'd never met, looking like a stranger. 2 months before the wedding, I made a desperate attempt to reconnect with my daughter. I invited her to lunch at the cafe, where we used to have our Sunday brunches, hoping familiar surroundings might bring back the Amanda I knew. She arrived 30 minutes late immediately, apologizing that she could only stay for 45 minutes because she had a meeting with the calligrapher who was hand-lettering the seating cards. "Can you believe some people still haven't RSVP'd?" she said, checking her phone repeatedly throughout our brief meal. "Blake says we should just cut them from the list." I reached for her hand across the table. "Amanda, sweetheart, Are you happy? Is all this what you really want? For just a moment, I saw confusion cross her face, a flicker of the daughter I recognized. Then her phone buzzed with a text from Blake, and the moment was gone. Of course I'm happy, Mom. This is going to be the wedding of the season. Blake's business associates are even flying in from Europe. As she left, barely touching her food, I realized that the wedding had nothing to do with celebrating Amanda and Blake's love and everything to do with creating a spectacle of wealth and status. And I wondered when exactly I had lost my daughter to this world I couldn't understand or afford. The pre-wedding dinner was scheduled for Thursday evening at Oceano, an exclusive cliffside restaurant where the valet parking alone cost $50. I'd bought a new dress for the occasion, the most expensive item I'd purchased in years, a navy blue cocktail dress that had consumed a significant portion of my monthly budget. I accessorized with the pearl earrings Michael had given me on our last anniversary, hoping to carry a piece of him with me for strength. Blake's family arrived in a convoy of luxury vehicles, his parents in a Bentley, his sister and her husband in a Range Rover. His grandparents chauffeured in a Mercedes. Blake and Amanda arrived last in his Maserati, making an entrance as other diners turned to watch. Amanda looked beautiful but unrecognizable in a white designer dress, her hair and makeup professionally done for the occasion. She air-kissed my cheeks, careful not to smudge her makeup, so different from the tight hugs she used to give me. "You look nice, Mom," she said, though I caught her glancing at my sensible heels with a slight frown. We were seated at a private table overlooking the ocean, the sunset creating a spectacular backdrop that seemed orchestrated specifically for the Hamilton family's enjoyment. Richard ordered champagne for the table without consulting the price, then launched into a story about his recent golf trip to Scotland. The conversation revolved around people I didn't know, clubs I'd never been invited to, and experiences far beyond my financial reach. I smiled and nodded, feeling increasingly invisible as plates of tiny, elaborate food were placed before us. After the main course, just as servers cleared our plates, Blake cleared his throat and reached into his jacket pocket. "Before dessert, I think we should address the elephant in the room," he said with a practiced smile. "The financial aspects of this celebration." The table fell silent. My stomach clenched as Blake pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, and turned it toward me. On the screen was a spreadsheet detailing wedding expenses with a total at the bottom that made me feel faint: $350,000. "As you can see," Blake continued, his voice smooth and confident, "we've created a truly exceptional event. The best of everything for our special day." He scrolled to another page on his phone, revealing a pie chart. "My parents have generously covered 80% of the expenses as a gift to us. Considering the 15% that Amanda and I are contributing from our savings, we believe it's only fair that you cover the remaining portion, Dorothy." He slid the phone closer to me, and I saw the figure $60,000. "That's your fair share for this luxury experience," he said, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "I'm sure you wouldn't want to miss being part of Amanda's perfect day. After all, this is a once-in-a-lifetime celebration." I stared at the number, unable to process what was happening. $60,000 was more than half of my retirement savings money I'd carefully built over decades of responsible financial planning. Before I could respond, Amanda leaned forward, her expression hard in a way I'd never seen before. "Mom, Blake and I have discussed this extensively," she said, her voice carrying a warning tone. "This contribution is non-negotiable if you want to be part of our lives moving forward." She paused, then delivered the blow I never could have anticipated from my own child. "If you can't support us in this, then you should understand that our relationship will change. You can either be part of our future or enjoy your solitude in an old age home when the time comes. It's really that simple." The table fell silent. Blake's parents exchanged satisfied glances. His sister studied her manicure, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. I felt as though I'd been physically struck. The daughter I had raised, the child I had sacrificed everything for, was threatening to abandon me in my old age if I didn't empty my savings account for her one-day celebration. Somehow I managed to lift my champagne glass to my lips with a steady hand. The cool liquid gave me a moment to collect my thoughts, to push past the crushing pain, and think clearly. When I set the glass down, I found myself smiling. It wasn't a happy smile, but one of sudden, perfect clarity. "You forgot one thing," I said softly, my voice carrying in the silent tension around the table. Blake's confident expression faltered. Amanda's eyes widened slightly. Their faces seemed to pale in the sunset light. "Excuse me for a moment," I said, rising from my seat with as much dignity as I could muster. "I need to visit the ladies' room." As I walked away, I heard Blake murmuring reassurances to his parents. "Don't worry, she'll come around. Amanda says she's always been financially conservative, but she has the money." In the elegant bathroom, I locked myself in a stall and took deep, shaking breaths. Tears threatened, but I refused to let them fall. This wasn't the time for weakness. In the quiet of that bathroom stall, looking at my reflection in the polished metal door, I saw Michael's strength in my eyes. "What would you do, Michael?" I whispered. And in that moment, I knew exactly what my late husband would have advised. Stand your ground. Don't let them bully you. Remember your worth. I washed my hands, reapplied my lipstick, and squared my shoulders. Whatever happened next, I would face it with the dignity and strength that had carried me through widowhood and single parenthood. I would not be intimidated by wealth or status, and I would not allow my daughter to forget the values I had worked so hard to instill in her. When I returned to the table, a different energy surrounded me. I wasn't just Dorothy the widow anymore, or Dorothy the inadequate mother-in-law. I was Dorothy Jenkins, a woman who had survived losing the love of her life and raised a successful daughter alone. A woman who knew her own worth. I sat down calmly, placed my napkin in my lap, and he looked directly at Blake. "You mentioned something I forgot," Blake prompted, his confidence slightly shaken by my composed demeanor. "Yes," I said clearly, making sure everyone at the table could hear me. "You forgot about Michael's life insurance policy." Amanda's eyes widened. She knew about the policy, of course, but we rarely discussed it. When Amanda's father died, I continued looking around the table. He left a substantial life insurance policy. As a financial advisor, I invested that money wisely on Amanda's behalf. I've been managing it separately from my own finances for 17 years. I turned to Amanda, whose expression had shifted from entitled confidence to confusion. "The education fund that helped with your college, that came partially from my earnings. The bulk of your father's insurance money has been growing in a separate account. I had planned to give it to you on your 30th birthday, but perhaps now is a better time." I reached into my purse and withdrew a folded document I had brought, in case an opportunity for a private conversation with Amanda arose. It was a statement showing the current balance of the account, $150,000. "Your father wanted to make sure you were taken care of," I said softly. "And over the years, through careful management, his gift to you has grown." I slid the paper toward Amanda, whose hands trembled slightly as she picked it up. Blake immediately leaned over to look, his eyes widening at the figure. "However," I continued, my voice stronger now, "this money comes with the same values your father and I always shared. Responsibility, compassion, recognition that people are more important than things." I looked directly at Blake's parents, whose expressions had shifted from smug satisfaction to uncertainty. I raised my daughter to understand that love isn't measured by price tags, that family doesn't come with financial obligations attached, that relationships aren't transactions. Blake cleared his throat, clearly trying to regain control of the situation. "This is wonderful news, Dorothy. This means you can easily contribute the $60,000 we discussed and still have plenty left over for Amanda's future." "No," I said simply. "That's not what this means at all." I turned to Amanda, whose eyes were filling with tears, though whether from anger or shame I couldn't yet tell. "This money is yours, Amanda. It always has been. What you do with it is your decision. But I will not be contributing $60,000 or any other amount to this wedding. Not because I can't afford it, but because I won't participate in something that places spectacle over substance." Blake's parents exchanged whispers. His mother's face had gone rigid with barely contained outrage. His father leaned forward. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately." Richard suggested, his businessman's instinct for damage control kicking in. Family financial matters are delicate. "No," I said again, finding power in that simple word. "There's nothing private about what just happened here. You and your son presented me with a financial demand and an ultimatum in front of the entire family. So I'm responding in kind." By now, other diners were glancing in our direction, aware that something tense was unfolding at our table. I didn't care. Years of accommodating others, of trying to fit into the Hamiltons' world, of watching my daughter slip away, had reached their limit. "Amanda," I said, turning fully toward my daughter, "I love you, I have always loved you, I always will, but I will not be held hostage financially or emotionally, not even by you." Amanda's face crumpled. The sophisticated facade she'd been maintaining shattered, and for a moment I saw my little girl again, the one who used to crawl into my lap after having a bad dream. Blake reached for her arm. "Amanda, calm down. This isn't the place for a scene." She jerked away from him, looking from the financial statement to me, then to Blake and his parents. "You told me she needed to contribute," she said to Blake, her voice rising. "You said it was the principle of the thing that she should show her support, financially." "Lower your voice," Blake hissed, glancing around at the other diners. "Why?" Amanda demanded, standing abruptly. "Are you worried what your business associates will think? Is that more important than the fact that you made me threaten my own mother?" Blake's father tried to intervene. "Amanda, please sit down. We can work this out reasonably. Perhaps Dorothy could contribute a different amount that she feels comfortable with." "That's not the point." Amanda cried, tears now streaming down her face, ruining the perfect makeup. "The point is that none of this is what I wanted. Not the venue, not the ridiculous orchids flown in from wherever, not the marble dance floor. None of it." She turned to me, her expression raw with pain. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened to me. I don't know how I became this person." With that, she fled from the table, running toward the restaurant's exit. Blake stood quickly, shooting me a venomous look. "Are you happy now?" he spat before chasing after Amanda. His parents sat in stunned silence. After a moment, his mother found her voice. "Well, I have never been so insulted in my life," she declared, as though my refusal to bankrupt myself for her son's extravaganza was a personal affront. I reached for my purse, took out my wallet, and placed enough cash on the table to cover my portion of the meal. "Thank you for dinner," I said, standing. "I believe we're finished here." As I walked out of the restaurant, I felt dozens of eyes on me, but for the first time in months I stood tall. The cool evening air hit my face as I stepped outside, and I took a deep breath of it, feeling as though I could finally breathe again. There was no sign of Amanda or Blake in the parking lot. I collected my car from the valet and drove home in silence, replaying the evening's events. There was pain, certainly, but underneath it was something unexpected relief. The truth was finally out. Whatever happened next would at least be honest. At home, I kicked off my shoes, hung up the expensive dress I'd never wear again, and sat on my back porch looking at the stars. I thought about Michael, about what he would have thought of this evening, of Blake, of the woman his daughter had temporarily become. "I did my best, Michael," I whispered to the night sky. "I hope it was enough." I didn't hear from Amanda that night, though I left my phone by my bed, hoping she might call. despite everything, I worried about her alone with the Hamiltons and their influence. I slept fitfully, waking often to check for messages that didn't come. The next morning, I received a text from Amanda. Wedding postponed. Need time to think. Please don't contact Blake or his family. That was it. No apology, no explanation, just a cold directive. I respected her request, though it took every ounce of maternal restraint not to drive to her apartment to make sure she was okay. Instead, I went to work focusing on my client's financial needs as a welcome distraction from my own emotional turmoil. A week passed with no further communication from Amanda. I saw on social media that she had taken a leave of absence from the hospital, citing personal reasons. Blake posted cryptic statements about challenging times and standing by his choices, garnering sympathetic responses from his network of affluent connections. Then my phone rang with Blake's number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Dorothy," he began without preamble. "This situation has gotten out of hand. I'm calling to find a reasonable solution." "Is Amanda with you?" I asked. "She's taking some time alone," he replied evasively. "Look, I understand that the dinner conversation came across as demanding. That wasn't the intention. We merely wanted to ensure that everyone was contributing appropriately to this celebration. By threatening to abandon me in my old age if I didn't comply," I asked quietly. There was a pause. Amanda was emotional. Those words weren't planned. "But the financial demand was," I pointed out. "Yes," he admitted, "and I still believe it's reasonable. However, I'm willing to negotiate a more comfortable figure for you. Perhaps 30,000. My parents feel strongly that you should have some financial stake in this wedding." I took a deep breath. "Blake, my answer remains no. Not 60,000, not 30,000, not 1,000. This isn't about what I can afford. It's about what I will accept in terms of how I'm treated and how my daughter is influenced." "You're being stubborn," he snapped, his polished veneer cracking. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Amanda is questioning everything now. She's talking about a simple ceremony instead of the celebration we've spent months planning. My parents' friends have already booked travel arrangements. I'm sorry for any inconvenience," I said, not feeling sorry at all. "But this is between Amanda and me now." He hung up without another word. I expected more calls, perhaps from his parents, but none came. Instead, I received a brief email from Margot, the wedding planner, noting that my attendance at future planning events was on hold pending resolution of family matters. During this period of silence, I sought advice from my longtime friend Sarah, an attorney who had helped me with Michael's estate years earlier. Over coffee in her office, I explained the situation. "Should I be worried about legal repercussions?" I asked. "Could they somehow try to claim that money was promised or expected?" Sarah shook her head firmly. "No, you made no contractual agreement, signed nothing. The fact that they sprung this demand on you at dinner actually works in your favor. It demonstrates there was no prior arrangement." She reached across her desk to squeeze my hand. "Dorothy, you did the right thing. Standing your ground isn't easy, especially when it comes to family. But allowing yourself to be financially manipulated would have set a dangerous precedent." 10 days after the disastrous dinner, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. When I opened it, I found Amanda standing there looking exhausted. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face bare of makeup, wearing jeans and a sweatshirt, rather than the designer clothes she'd favored recently. "Mom," she said, her voice breaking. "Can I come in?" I opened my arms and she fell into them, sobbing against my shoulder, like she used to as a little girl. I led her inside to the living room couch where we had shared so many conversations over the years. When her tears subsided, she looked around the familiar room, touching the throw blanket she had given me years ago, before Blake. "I've made such a mess of everything," she said finally. "Do you want to tell me about it?" I asked gently. The story poured out of her. How Blake had initially charmed her with his confidence and worldliness. how his lifestyle had seemed exciting, a glimpse into a world so different from our modest one. How gradually his suggestions about her appearance, her speech, her friends had evolved from advice to criticism to control. He always made it seem like he was helping me, she explained, twisting her engagement ring. Like I just needed polishing to fit into his world. At first I thought maybe he was right. Maybe I did need to upgrade my wardrobe, change, my hair, learn about wine and art. But then it was everything. The way I spoke to servers in restaurants, the friends I kept in touch with, my relationship with you. She described how Blake and his family had systematically isolated her, filling her schedule with their events and obligations, subtly criticizing her whenever she prioritized her old life. When I mentioned our Sunday brunches, Vivian would make comments about how sweet it was that we were still so dependent on each other. Blake would schedule last-minute brunch meetings with his father's associates that I needed to attend to show my support. The wedding planning had taken the control to another level. What had started as an exciting collaboration had become a series of mandates: the beach venue because the garden was provincial, the designer gown because her original choices were common, the elaborate dinner because a buffet would be tacky. I kept thinking, just get through the wedding, then things will calm down, she said. But then Blake started talking about which neighborhood we should live in, after which private schools had the best networks for our future children, which country clubs we needed to join to maintain the right connections. The most devastating revelation came last. Blake, for all his talk of wealth and success, was deeply in debt. The luxury cars were leased, the expensive watches were bought on credit. His parents' lifestyle was maintained through leveraged investments and business loans. The $60,000 wasn't just about making you contribute, Amanda admitted, her voice small with shame. They needed the money. The wedding was already over budget, and Blake's latest development project is behind schedule. They're leveraged to the hilt. I listened without interrupting, letting her release months of suppressed truth. When she finally fell silent, I asked the question that had been haunting me. Did you mean what you said about the old age home? Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. No. God, no. Blake suggested I say something dramatic if you resisted. He said it would shock you into compliance. I knew it was wrong, but by then I was so deep into their world, their way of thinking. I'm so ashamed, Mom. I don't know how to make this right. What do you want, Amanda? I asked. Not what Blake wants, not what his parents expect. What do you want? She twisted her engagement ring, staring at the enormous diamond. I don't know anymore. That's the scariest part. I've lost myself somewhere along the way. We talked through the night, cups of tea growing cold as we reconnected. Amanda cried more than once, mourning not just the relationship, but the person she'd allowed herself to become. I shared my own regrets about not speaking up sooner, about letting my fear of losing her prevent me from challenging the changes I saw. In the early morning hours, she made a decision. She would return the engagement ring. She would take a leave of absence from work and spend some time figuring out what she truly wanted without Blake's influence. I might stay with Madison for a while, she said, referring to a nursing school friend she'd lost touch with during her relationship with Blake. I need space from everyone, even you, to sort myself out. When she left the next day, I felt both heartbroken and hopeful. My daughter was in pain, but she was finding her way back to herself. The aftermath was not peaceful. Blake alternated between angry messages demanding Amanda return his calls and emotional pleas about how much he had changed. His parents attempted to contact me directly, suggesting we all meet to salvage the situation. I declined politely but firmly. Amanda needs to make her own decisions without pressure from any of us. I wrote in my final email to them. 3 weeks later, Amanda returned the engagement ring via certified mail. That same day, she received a cease and desist letter from Blake's father's attorney claiming she had made promises regarding wedding expenses and family financial commitments. Sarah helped us draft a response that shut down any further legal threats. "They have no case," she assured us. "This is just intimidation." Amanda moved back home temporarily while looking for a new apartment. Our relationship remained fragile, healing in fits and starts. Some days we could laugh together like before, sharing memories of Michael, or making plans for a simple beach trip to Maine. Other days the pain and betrayal lingered between us, making conversations stilted and careful. "I keep waiting to feel like myself again," Amanda confessed one evening as we washed dishes together. "I look in the mirror and still see traces of who I became with Blake." "Healing isn't linear," I reminded her. "You're finding your way back, but you won't be exactly the same person you were before. That's not necessarily a bad thing." Slowly, Amanda began reconnecting with old friends, returning to work, and rebuilding her identity independent of Blake and his world. She deleted her social media accounts temporarily, tired of the carefully curated image she'd been maintaining and the constant updates from Blake's circle. And gradually, Sunday brunches resumed. Not every week, not with the same innocent joy as before, but with a new depth of understanding between us. We had both been tested, had both made mistakes, and were finding a way forward together. 6 months after the disastrous pre-wedding dinner, Amanda and I sat on the deck of a small rental cottage in Maine, watching the sunset over the same beach we'd visited throughout her childhood. We'd decided to revive our tradition, though this time Amanda had insisted on paying her share. "I've been thinking a lot about boundaries," she said, wrapping her hands around her mug of tea. At 33, she looked more like herself than she had in the months with Blake, her hair back to its natural color, her face relaxed and makeup-free. "What kind of boundaries?" I asked. "Healthy ones," she replied. "In therapy, we've been talking about how I lost myself in Blake's world because I didn't have strong enough boundaries, but also about how important it is to rebuild boundaries with you too. Different ones based on respect, but still clear." She'd been seeing a therapist specializing in coercive relationships, unpacking not just the dynamic with Blake, but patterns in her life that had made her vulnerable to his influence. "I always thought I was strong," she continued, "independent. But looking back, I can see how Blake identified my weak spots, my desire for approval, my secret worry that our life wasn't enough somehow." I nodded, having done my own soul-searching. "I wonder if I sheltered you too much after your father died, if I didn't prepare you enough for people who might take advantage." Amanda shook her head firmly. "Mom, you gave me a solid foundation. The problem wasn't your parenting. The problem was that I stopped trusting myself and started trusting someone who didn't have my best interests at heart." The money from Michael's life insurance remained untouched. After careful consideration, we agreed that Amanda would take control of it when she felt ready, perhaps using some to buy her own small condo, rather than continuing to rent. "Dad would be proud of how you've managed it all these years," she said, "and I think he'd be proud of how we handled this whole mess, eventually." We had established new traditions, monthly dinners rather than weekly brunches, occasional movie nights, planned vacations like this one. Amanda had accepted a position at a different hospital, one that offered advancement opportunities, and the chance to specialize in pediatric care, her original passion. 3 months earlier, we'd had an unexpected encounter. While dining at a new restaurant downtown, we spotted Blake across the room with a young woman wearing a familiar large diamond ring. He saw us at the same moment, his expression freezing, before he quickly guided his companion to a table far from our view. "Poor girl," Amanda had murmured. "I hope she has stronger boundaries than I did." Instead of ruining our evening, the sighting had reinforced Amanda's certainty about her decision. Later that week, she declined a nursing position at a prestigious private hospital after learning it was on the board of directors. "Some bridges aren't worth rebuilding," she explained. Now, as we watched the Maine waves crash against the shore, Amanda shared news I'd been both expecting and dreading. "I've been offered a position at Children's Hospital in Chicago," she said. "It's an amazing opportunity, a chance to work with their pediatric trauma team and help develop new protocols." My heart clenched at the thought of her moving so far away, but I smiled genuinely. "That sounds perfect for you. When would you start?" "September. I know it's far, Mom, but it's something I need to do for myself, to prove I can build a life that's truly mine." I reached over to squeeze her hand. "I understand, and Chicago has great direct flights from here. We'll make it work." That evening, we scattered a small portion of Michael's ashes in the ocean, a ritual we'd discussed, but never felt ready for until now. As the sunset turned the water to gold, Amanda whispered, "I think Dad would say we're going to be okay now." Back at home, after our trip, life settled into a new rhythm. Amanda prepared for her move, and I focused on my career, even considering my own next chapters. For the first time in years, I accepted a dinner invitation from Thomas, a widower client who had been gently pursuing me for coffee dates. The weekend before Amanda left for Chicago, we reinstated our Sunday brunch tradition one last time at our favorite cafe. As we shared a plate of blueberry pancakes, Amanda raised her coffee cup in a toast. "To standing firm in your worth," she said. "If you hadn't had the courage to speak up that night, I might be trapped in a marriage as false as that beach wedding would have been." "To recognizing true value," I replied, clinking my cup against hers. "Not in bank accounts or status, but in how people treat each other." As we finished our meal, I reflected on the journey we'd traveled. The pain of nearly losing my daughter to a world of superficial values had been excruciating, but the woman sitting across from me now was stronger, wiser, and more authentically herself than she might have been without that experience. "You know," I said as we walked to our cars, "sometimes the kindest thing we can do for someone we love is to let them face the consequences of their choices." Amanda hugged me tightly. "And sometimes the bravest thing we can do is admit when we've lost our way and find the courage to start again." Later that week, I drove Amanda to the airport for her flight to Chicago. As we embraced at the security checkpoint, I felt the familiar ache of separation, but also a new confidence in our bond. This separation wasn't about distance, but about growth, about Amanda building her life on her own terms while carrying the values we shared. "I love you, Mom," she said, her eyes bright with tears and excitement for her future. "Thank you for never giving up on me even when I lost sight of myself." "I love you too," I replied. "Always have, always will. No price tag attached." As I watched her walk through security, I thought about the strength that passes from mother to daughter across generations. Michael had given Amanda his compassionate spirit and determination. I had given her the courage to stand up for herself and recognize her true worth. Together, we had taught her that love isn't measured in dollars, but in the courage to be authentic, even when it's difficult. That lesson was worth more than any beach wedding could ever be. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself when someone tried to take advantage of you? Or have you experienced watching a loved one change under someone else's influence? Share your story in the comments. And if this resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real stories about family boundaries and finding your worth. Remember, the strongest people aren't those who never fall, but those who have the courage to rise again after stumbling. Thank you for listening to my journey.